This week's Duncan Disorderly column examines the public health system. I'm joined by columnist Duncan Garner. Now, you kick off by joking that this column comes with a health warning. Why?
This is to get people in to read it, to be honest. It comes with a health warning because it's actually concerning. So did a lot of reading and went to a lot of the doctors' reports and doctor magazines and some of the doctors' views of their own system. And they've been warning successive governments for probably a decade or so now that the system's underfunded. So it's very easy to point the finger that one government's to blame, but you can look at probably the last two governments who've brought on average about 70,000 people a year into New Zealand. That's the uptick of immigration. So if you do that year on year, and suddenly over 10 years you've got 700,000 more people, but you haven't funded New Zealand's health system to that point, you've got massive shortages. It looks incremental initially, but over a 10-year or 15-year time frame, it gets quite significantly different to what was there at the start. So we need a population debate. I mean, New Zealand needs a population debate. Who do we want here? How many people do we want here? And what should the health system look like and how should it be funded? So that's pretty much where I've headed in this column.
It's such a huge issue to tackle. Where would we even start?
In terms of the population debate?
In terms of rejigging the whole health system.
I know. Well, it's not me that's rejigging it. It's this government's rejigging it, and so they've got a New Zealand Health Agency and a Māori Health Authority that they've spent significant money on restructuring, and how many hip operations. What's the opportunity cost? As a pure economic viewpoint, what's the opportunity cost of realigning and restructuring the health system during a pandemic? I wonder if it should have been pushed later, and this should have been a time for surgeries. 3 hospitals in the past 7 days have cancelled their elective surgery. Dunedin effectively put up the full sign on last Wednesday, and Middlemore has as well. And Auckland has too. So the hospitals are now not doing operations because they don't have the workforce, especially with COVID, which is taking people out. There's a sort of a second wave, I think, of COVID that's come through, and it's affecting, teachers and nurses and doctors and so forth. But we're thin on the ground, and they were warned about this. And we've paid lip service to it. Successive governments paid lip service to funding it properly.
Now, in the column, you look at prioritising the treaty, which the government wants to do. Māori as a population face a lot of healthcare inequality. So what's wrong with doing this?
So the major thing that's been identified by the workforce itself is a lack of a workforce. So if you don't have a workforce, you don't have a system. And it's not me that's identifying it as a priority. It's Andrew Little's recent speech where he set up the government's priorities in this area. And the first thing he says is it's Te Tiriti o Waitangi or Te Au Māori issues as being the number one on the list of 5. I would have thought that, and while it's important that I'm not arguing that Māori have missed out, they have missed out, and they haven't been treated well in a system that has been designed for them. So it does need to be reworked. But is it the number one priority, or is the number one priority getting a workforce in there, trained, established, and in the system? Because what's the point of having Te Ao Māori as a centrepiece if you don't have the staff to do anything? So I just think that it's skewed, and they've got it around the wrong way.
So what you're thinking is that the workplace shortages we have in the system should be the government's number one priority to fix? Well,
if you listen to the people on the ground, and when we're closing hospitals for elective surgeries, and we don't have... there's huge vacancies across psychologists and so forth, and eating disorders and everything, then yeah. I mean, I'd stand by this in a month of Sundays. You have to have a system before you can prioritise within the system. Well, what's the point of prioritising all these different issues if you don't have a system? We're trying to fit more and more people into a smaller car every year, and the car's not going to go anymore. So I think we've got a major problem, and I think the government is its priorities are right, but they're quite slightly around the wrong way. The 1 to 5 needs to be maybe 5, then 1, then 2, 3, 4. How can you put Māori first in a system if there's no system? I find it hard to argue.
So what do they need to focus on now?
Getting a workforce, training people up, opening the borders, getting the people in that we need. If you go to the immigration, even the mid list of There's three different areas in immigration that they look at, but there's a long-term shortage. It's all health sector. Half the jobs in available in New Zealand today are from this sector. There'll be 80,000 people working in the health system once it's up and running properly, but they're probably 20,000 short right now. 20,000 professionals. You can't train them overnight, but you might have thought that this government might have done something in the last 5 years in this area. They probably have, but you just haven't seen it yet. But the headline numbers are massive, $1.9 billion of new spending in mental health. Where is it? Because we're 148 psychologists short. There's 148 job ads for psychs that haven't been employed. How did it get to that point?
Duncan Garner, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.